Hello, this is Marie. This is part 2 of talking about controllers using MVC5. We're going to make a couple quick changes to our default application here. Again, I haven't made any coding changes, and I just want to review the default. As you run things, you can pull up the About, the Home page, login, and so on. This home page runs the index home controller, and it does change the looks as you are using it on different devices. So let's go and make some changes. First, to the default view here. I'm going to look first at the shared layout, the default shared layout, and just go ahead and change the default title to, I'm just going to say Company XYZ. I'm going to delete, well, I guess I'll leave some of this basic information here. If you go to the About or the Contact page, you can simply, change your contact information here. I'm just going to say I'll just put Company John Doe here. As you continue to change your contact information, it has a simple template up here. If you want to say just put Test City, Wisconsin, and then here's your telephone number here. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can go ahead and change your email contact information here. There we go. Let's go ahead and try to test the new contact page. And as you review your test, you can see your contact HTML page represents your changes. Name, city, phone number, email, and so on. Also, if you go to your home page and your index, again, you can change your heading here. So you can see it better. And as you modify this, you can simply delete what you don't want. Then you can see that that information changed from the index or the home page. Okay, we'll go back to working and talking about the controllers specifically. So if you want to add a new controller, you simply right-click on the controller folder, Add Controller. And then we will just pick MVC5 empty controller. Click OK or add. And then you can change the default to this, and we can call this Hello World for a good example. And you'll see some of the default information here. You have an action result, which is index and returns a view. We'll just make some changes here to the index. We're going to pass a string to it. Return a string, I'm sorry, excuse me. And then we'll change this and we'll say this is my default page. So we're returning a string, and as we test that, okay, we did not specify when we ran it a specific the Hello World controller. It's running our home controller here. So if you want to run a specific controller, you put in that controller name. Hello World. And then it does run your index action method by default, and it's returning this method. This is my default page, which I specified here. So if you do not, when you test your application, if you do not specify a controller, it executes the home controller, which executes the index action method. But we specified when we ran it the hello controller, and then it runs your default index action method within that. So let's add another action method here. And we'll just copy paste for ease. And we'll return another string, and we're going to call this welcome as far as the action methods goes. And we'll go ahead and run that and try to execute that welcome action method within the Hello World controller. And then we want to specify the welcome method, action method, and we'll see what line of code it returns. So this is my welcome action method, and again, if we leave that off, you can guess that it will execute the default index method. So as you test your applications, it runs the controller followed by your action method. That's how it knows what code to execute. I'd like to go over another technique used in controllers, and that is how to pass data using a query string to a controller. So I modified my welcome controller. The welcome controller still is sending back a text message if you want to return that. But I'm also, when I'm running it, I'm requesting a name and an integer as input variables to this controller. And then when I'm returning it, I'm returning a message using HTTP utility HTML encode technique in order to build the message back to the user. So you'll see when I ran it, hello world, welcome controller, but I'm passing to this controller a query string, so I need a question mark followed by the name of the variable, name equals sending the data John, and the second variable I'm sending in that query string, separate it with an and sign, and I say number of times equals 55. Okay, I see I typed that incorrectly. So that's why the default shows of 1. I'll correct that. You will see that I corrected my parameters, the name of my variables, name equals John, and num times equals 55. So when I ran it, it says hello John, number of times is, and 55, which is what data I sent in that query string, not the default of 1. One more technique that I'd like to show is how to pass specific parameters to a controller not using a query string. Sometimes it gets complicated using query strings where a user needs to know the variable names, and this is an easier technique. Again, I've changed the same welcome controller action method. I'm sending name and I'm sending a integer. I called it ID. It has a default of 1, and then I'm returning back what the user entered. One additional thing that has to be changed in order for this to work is in the route config file in the app startup folder. This is what defaults to how the user enters things and what it maps to. This is called routing. So it maps to the controller, to the action method. What I did add is this information here. Called it the map route of hello, and a user can enter a controller, an action method, followed by the name and ID without specifying those exact variable names, followed in between forward slashes. So when you look at how that runs, I'll just run it again. I'll say hello world welcome, but I want to specify a name and a number. So I said the hello world controller maps to the welcome action method, and it is expecting in 2 parameters using this routing information. So if I look at the home controller again, hello world controller, it's expecting a name and an ID. And the result is I entered in hello world, the welcome controller, followed by the welcome action method within the hello world controller, followed by the name as a parameter and a number, an integer. And it was able to retrieve that and build this message. This is one simple action method that I just added just to illustrate the use of how the controller works and executes the action methods within it. I added another goodbye action method, and all I did is return the message goodbye. So when I executed this, I have hello world, my hello world controller, executing the goodbye action method. Goodbye action method returns this message. So some observations here. Browsing to the hello world index and hello world goodbye caused the index and the goodbye methods of the hello world controller class to be executed without any additional configuration. This is called routing. We did make that additional change to allow for just parameters to be sent instead of using the query string, but every request does go through a controller. So the controller actions can be thought of as if the web browser was directly calling the methods or the controller class. The class method and parameters are all specified as path segments or query strings. Routing technology maps to the URL actions. In general, controllers are called via the URL. They execute your custom code and they can return a view. Controllers handle the interactions of the user and the model objects and the views. They are responsible for responding to the user input, manipulating the appropriate model objects, and then selecting the view to display. That's all. I'll stop here. These are the things we covered in this demo.